bags with dirt. You know, kids just call it dirt, but it's the soil. And I learned that he sent the soil off, and when it came back, the chemist, he would send it to the lab, and the chemist would tell him exactly how much nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium he needed to put on that field to save him money, because we have to save money where we can. And it was the perfect example of precision ag. And so at the bottom of this activity, it kind of tells you to explain to your kids that farmers use fertilizers, but we don't just go to a field and put as much nitrogen as possible. That wouldn't even make sense financially. Or, you know, we really care about the soil that we are planting our crops in to grow the most food and the best that we can. So, you know, a farmer has to be pretty smart and study about these things. And so I think this just does a good job of educating the kids that it's not dirt, it's actually soil. And so anyway, your materials that you'll need for this activity are instant pudding. Obviously, it kind of talks about making it, but we just get the already made at Walmart. So if you have, you know, 25 kids, you can make it. You can go exactly by the recipe, but you can also already buy the pre-made, which is a little bit easier. We kind of like to skip some steps if we can, keep it simple. But what you're going to do is, I'll just go ahead and show you. I already have mine made. And you're going to crumble up some vanilla wafers. You're going to need vanilla wafers, chocolate pudding, and crumbled up Oreos, okay? So this is just a symbol of the bedrock, or the first layer of soil is the bedrock or the parent material. And these are vanilla wafers, yum. Okay, but they're very light. They're not very rich in color. Exactly, right? Now, then your next layer is going to be your subsoil, which is going to demonstrate that's your pudding layer. And it's going to show how that's where the plant root normally goes to get the water and nutrients that it needs. But then the most important and most vital soil is your topsoil. And it's the Oreos are crumbled up, and it has that organic matter. And we need the worms and insects and bugs and things to get in there and mull that around. And that's where the plants are going to receive most of their nutrients. And you can also tie in this, the plant nutrient team. And it talks about, you know, the soil sometimes need vitamins. Kids can understand that. You don't have to get all above their head and everything. But this would be a great material, a resource to parent with this. But to grow the tallest and the strongest, and this explains what the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, how you can tell which plants need more of which fertilizer, okay, and how we use those as farmers. Also, you can change up this activity, anything with just a little variation of color. You can get very creative and do this with lots of different resources. You can use cereal. You wanted to do like a honeycomb or a Cocoa Puffs, and then pour the milk, a little bit of milk, to kind of show how the water filtrates through the soil. Another activity that I saw that was pretty interesting, that the same concept involved, you make a Play-Doh mold with 3 different colors, and then you use a straw, which is a pretty simple example of the soil samples that the farmers actually do. And it shows you, you know, the layers of the soil, and maybe you're low on topsoil. And also explain that as agriculturalists and as farmers, we use no-till farming to sustain our soils and keep that topsoil as much as we can. Talk about erosion and all those kinds of things. So this is the mud pies activity in your alphabet soup book. You can also throw in a gummy worm if you want to get creative with it. Okay,
up there. So I'm going to be talking about dairy and dairy alternatives. And I like to call it dairy alternatives because when you're dealing with almond milk and soy milk, I don't even like to call it that because it's not even really in the same category. To each his own, I suppose you could say. And if you were to define dairy, if you would like to look at the Webster's definition of it, it's going to tell you that it comes from mammals and it is actually an animal product. So if we're looking at dairy and dairy alternatives, I don't like to call almond milk, soy milk dairy. But most people believe, or many people believe, that dairy substitutes such as almond and soy are actually healthier for you. But would it surprise you to know that when doing a side-by-side comparison, that milk is actually healthier choice? So I have a chart here that lets you know the amount of protein, that's where the pro comes in there, and then the fat percent as well. And if you were to look at almond, it only has 1 gram of protein in there. And when you were looking at the reasons why we're drinking almond or soy dairy alternatives, if you're doing it for a healthier choice, I would be considering how much protein is in there. Soy is actually going to be the closest in the amount of protein. But if you look at skim milk, low fat, 2%, whole milk, all of these have 8 grams of protein in an 8-ounce serving. So if you think about the little cartons of milk at school, that is going to be a serving. But if I'm looking at fat percentage, we've been told for a really long time, several years in fact, that milk, whole milk is bad for you. So if I'm looking at the fat content in almond, soy, skim, low 2%, and whole milk, I'm actually looking at it going up. Now, almond and soy, the fat percentage of it is actually closer to that of 2% milk. Now, we've been told that whole milk is bad for you. But if I'm looking at the percentage of fat here, when you think the word whole, you actually think that there's a lot more than, it's at 3.75%. So really, it's actually going to be less than 4, and it depends on their processing and what type of cow milk is going into it. For example, Jersey cows, which is a breed of dairy cows, has a higher percentage of what they call a butter fat. And that's where the more rich tasting ice cream and cheese, and we're actually going to be making butter in just a moment. And if you don't have a higher percentage of fat, then you're not going to be able to make those types of products. And there's been new research that has come out that has said that doctors have concluded that the frontal lobe of the brain is not fully developed until the age of 8, and whole milk aids in that development. So there's actually legislation now in the state of Tennessee and also at the national level that we change the type of milk that is provided to students at school. So right now we're in the skim milk to 1%, and if we're thinking of that these kids are still developing that frontal lobe, whole milk is what actually aids in that development. So that legislation that is in the legislature at the moment is actually going to be putting whole milk back into our schools. So if we're thinking about that implication, for example, my school, we are about 70% free and reduced meals. So several of our students are food insecure, which means that they don't have access to the nutritional food that they need. So most likely, if we go along with that understanding, a lot of our students aren't getting milk. So if they come to school and we are providing them with that whole milk, that is going to help that develop that frontal lobe. So why is that important? Well, that sets them up for more of a important groundwork to be able to be more successful academically. Now, if I go back to that fat content, I can actually think about making butter. Now, it is so easy. This is an unsalted butter because it's heavy whipping cream, and that's it. So you put it into a container. Good luck finding these though, because of everything being such portion control out because of the socially distancing. These are really hard to find. This is when if you can make friends with your cafeteria worker, sometimes they can hook you up with, maybe you are wanting to do it with 20 students. surely to goodness they can help you out if you make friends with your cafeteria worker. And it's just heavy whipping cream. It needs to come down to room temperature, because if you don't, it's going to take a little bit longer to make butter. And all you do is shake, 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 shake. And it's going to go through a process. It's going to make change sounds. And when it sounds like there's nothing there, you're going to keep shaking. And just beyond that is when you separate. And what's going to happen, there's going to be liquid. That liquid is actually the whey. Whey is then used, say, in protein drinks. So if you think about the protein versus fat content, that's what's separating when you are making the butter. You can also tie in about making ice cream. You have the educator's guide and the book for Tales from a Dairy Godmother. So it also talks about how when you're making the ice cream in this story, that what they're using and how it's important. So we can use all parts of the milk just by separating off the whey. The whey is then used, like I said.
Well, I was trying to think, because I laughed when I was thinking about how much we eat, but I literally go to the food city near where I live at, and it's like a grocery list of stuff for these workshops. And when you're making some of the things that we've been making, it's like, I mean, it does look very rich in snacky foods. And so I'll just preface it by saying this is for a workshop. This is definitely for a workshop. But I'm going to, believe it or not, I'm not going to do something about food this particular cycle, and just talk to you a little bit about the water cycle. And I do have my staff and workshop participants at other workshops. I always talk about my garage, and I'm like, I pulled this out of the garage this morning. And those of you all that have worked with science and weather know that this is one of those connectors to the 2-liter bottles. So I say that to say, kids love this. This is a really cheap thing that you can purchase, or you can make your own if you have industrial husbands or females in your family that know how to do some machining. You can actually take a piece of PVC and make these. I guess the challenge would be the threading, but they're very inexpensive. So I'll say that to be a preface into water. Kids are fascinated by weather, and it's a really easy topic. You just have to go outside and look up at the sky, and kids can be meteorologists. Short story about that. I really wanted to be a meteorologist when I was a kid, or a weather girl. And we had a weather girl named Margie Eisen in Knoxville that many years stayed on TV, and she had little catchphrases, and she gave away umbrellas, and loved Margie Eisen, and she's still around. And so I said something when I was on camera with Channel 10, a local TV station, that I would just love to be a weather girl, even over the age of 8. And so they invited me to the studio to talk about something in education. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So then the meteorologist for Channel 10 said, hey, I heard you wanted to be a meteorologist. And I said, yeah, I actually want to be a weather girl, but yes, a meteorologist. And so I went over, and he was showing me some of the things. And then the cameraman said, 3, 2, 1. And he actually put the little controller in my hand. I had no clue what I was doing. And so there is a hilarious, I hope it was taken down off YouTube, of me not knowing which way to point my hand toward the flat, the maps, and the map is over me, and it is hilarious. But it was my dream come true for 20 seconds. I was the weather person for Knoxville, and yeah, so this water circle bracelet, and I'm going to try to share the screen with you guys as well. Here we go. And I apologize, but my screen can be sort of messy. But you can, it says to start out with a poster, and I think it's important for the kids to visually see when we talk about evaporation and condensation. And this is a simpler one. I would probably use this, in the lower grade, 2nd, 3rd grade maybe, but some of that really good, rich, vocabulary you can definitely, start talking about that. But I think it's important to have visuals for students and to be able to frame what you're exactly talking about. But this is a really good visual, and I will just say that using a bracelet I have used it for remembering the order of the planets. I've used it for Bible school, remembering the books of the Bible. And so we'll talk about materials in a second, but this is the actual lesson to talk about the Earth's surface. And it sort of goes back with that apple. It goes hand in hand with talking about what part of the earth that we can farm and how much of, of our earth can we, the water is drinkable. And so that first little paragraph gives you some really good background information, because kids just say, okay, so we have, so much of our water is surrounding the earth, so we can drink it all. No, you really can't. So that's a good a bit of information. And then I remember back when I was learning the water cycle, we had to memorize the stages. And so I think we're sort of beyond that, but this is a great little representation for your students. So I use this twine, and I'll show you. You can buy it at a fabric store, JoAnn's. You can buy it at Walmart, I think. Or, as my dad says, you can use belling twine. You can go to the co-op and get it, or take it out of your dad's barn. So I use this just because it's a great opportunity to talk to the children about this material. If you are also you don't have a lot of time and you have a sewer in your family, you can use yarn. It's perfectly okay. You can use cotton string if you want to. You can use pipe cleaner. Pipe cleaner is a great way to use, especially for the younger kids, because you're going to be making this bracelet. So I pre-cut my strips. Now, I will say this, with adults in workshops, do not pre-cut, because we all are different sizes. And if you make a bracelet that's this size, it might hurt my feelings that I think I can get this around my wrist. So I usually allow the adults in the workshops to cut their own string. Oh, here's another piece of material. So this is a cool one. Leather. Leather is a really good one. And especially if your kids are going to want to wear these. So this is a good sustainable product, and you can talk about where leather comes from. That's another good little lesson. Storage wise, it's a little bit of an expense to begin with, but you can see I have these little Ziploc, nice little stackable containers, and I think they come in 250. You can buy these at Walmart as well. But so the expense, and probably Amazon if you are an Amazon fan, but the expense is a little bit to begin with, but you can reuse. I've used these for 4 years. So they're in my garage, some of my other things. But for kids, also, I like to go ahead and pre-package. Go ahead and have these pony beads in some kind of container. And a lot of times I have the everything. So it's just, you can use it as a center, you can use it as demonstration, you can use it, there are lots of ways. And even if you're doing virtual or online, this is something that they could pick up as part of some of the materials that you're passing out, and they can do it at home. This is not a really labor intense thing to do. So basically, it's all about what these beads represent, and you can talk to your students about the stages. You introduce evaporation.
Tanna,
Yes. Yes.
we can't see the materials. We can see your screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll go back to it. Thank you. So I will go ahead and flip back and let you see the materials. Thank you for that. And this is actually from, I'll flip down and then I just basically, tell you the truth, I Googled it. It's on just about every ag page that you can imagine. So I just Googled it this morning, to tell you the truth. So I will go back to unsharing the screen so you can actually see. Sorry about that. Thank you for stop share. There we go. And get back to there we go. So here is the string. And here is the leather. It comes in and there is the fabulous yarn. So, and then I use the smaller Ziploc containers, the little plastics to put the pony beads in. And then I prepackage, usually, especially if I'm doing it with children, I'll go ahead and prepackage the pony beads and the piece of string. Now, you could use this as a center. If you're going back in person, you could have these in a center and have the kids walk through if you're using choice boards in your classroom. But this is a really easy way to do it, especially, like I said, if you're virtual and your kids, they follow along at home. But so each of these beads will represent part of the water cycle. And so basically, all you do is you have the kids string these wonderful beads, and you talk about your evaporation represents blue, your condensation represents white or yellow. And so you just talk about these different pieces of vocabulary as you string the beads. And the great part about it, the kids are so fascinated by, first of all, having something they think is a toy, and second of all, they get to wear it. So after they've strung their beads, you just simply use another pony bead to sort of thread between, and you simply have a beautiful bracelet to wear. I know that you're dying to have one of these for yourself, but it's a real easy way to have something to remind the kids about the different stages of the water cycle. And so sorry about forgetting not to share the screen, but I think you all get the gist of it, and we'll go on to our next activity.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we are still, the next activity that I'm going to talk to you guys about is the Garden in a Glove. It's the G in your alphabet soup, the alphabet soup book. So you could also, with this activity, the Who Grew My Soup, especially if you already have a garden grant, this activity can go along with so many different concepts and objectives that you may have. But when I think about this activity, I think about, so many times which I grew up shopping in the grocery store, so I had seen various vegetables and fruits and things like that. But what is the generation, what are the generations to come? What does their shopping look like? I have a 2-year-old, so I take advantage, and especially during the global pandemic, it's been very handy and convenient to just run by and order our groceries and those kinds of things. So sometimes just bringing in the carrots with the stem still on them, talking about the fact that some vegetables grow underground, some grow above ground, and those kinds of things. The Who Grew My Soup book is a wonderful book to incorporate around those activities and lessons. A colleague of ours, she actually makes a vegetable beef soup. It is, obviously veg all in a can and a crock pot, but the kids, she brings the vegetables in, and I think that's a wonderful thing for the kids to see, a radish. And I know we bought a house a few years ago, and the gentleman that owned it had a garden, and he said, "Don't forget to dig up my potatoes." And my kids went crazy just knowing that potatoes grew underground, and it was just like Christmas. But letting them, if you have a school garden, allowing the kids to plant seeds and vegetables and watching them grow, they take such pride and ownership in that. My 8-year-old loves cabbage and beets, and she likes lots of vegetables. So for her birthday, my mother-in-law bought her some cabbage plants. And so she planted them, and she was just so proud and watched them grow. And we had a little frost earlier in the spring, and we got home late and things were frosting, so we were trying to cover them up, and she was just, my cabbage. She just really worried over that cabbage, and it grew big, and we've enjoyed it, and we have eaten it all summer. It's been a great, we didn't even mean for it to be a project. It just kind of turned into something fun that she enjoyed to do. Also, with that being said, you can grow a garden out of so many things, and it doesn't have to be a labor intensive. You don't have to spend your whole summer at school weeding the garden and watering and doing all of that work yourself. If with a little bit of planning and hopefully our garden grant, you can have your garden, an early garden, and even start in February and plant some early spring, late winter crops. You can use even the seed packets for that nonfiction text that we hear so much about, for the kids to actually read and discover where their growing zones are, what their growing zones are. There's always so much to learn, and there's hopefully later on we'll talk about some online resources that you can actually go on some farm tours. Just like Tanna so kindly shared with us her story about not really understanding how pineapples came to be. So there's lots of things to learn. Even when you're growing your gardens, you can grow them in Rubbermaid containers. The little kiddie pools will be going on sale pretty soon. You can drill holes in those and grow them. Also keep in mind, in your winter gardens, I know like the lettuce and the radishes and things like that are tiny, tiny seeds, and you're just like, oh, my janitor would kill me. I can't even imagine. Well, they make these. Who knew? The little tape, they'll have the seeds on the tape. It's a little thin strip, and you can just cut them off. You can use your garden grant to purchase soil and things like that, and you can do your mud pie activity, talking about putting healthy soil in your garden. But you can use that money to go toward the purchase of your garden. Now, obviously, if you can have a huge garden at your school, that's awesome. But you can change it up too. But you can use those if you're going to have an early garden. Put those little tape, just put that tape in the soil, and those seeds will grow. Isn't that the neatest thing? I didn't know that. So, getting into the activity, you'll obviously want to discuss with the kids that plants need sunlight, water, and to grow and things like that. The materials you're going to need just a clear glove. I don't know if you can see that very well. You'll want to label the fingers of the glove of the seeds that you're going to plant. Now, the seeds that also keep in mind, a lot of your co-op stores, maybe Tractor Supply, if you just ask, they might donate these seeds to your classroom. Don't be afraid to ask. Or maybe your Farm Bureau will sponsor your classroom, or maybe the Tractor Supply will sponsor your classroom and just say, I need a couple bags of seed, 5 different seeds, hopefully, to do an activity or even to have a garden, and see if you can work something like that out. And what are they going to say? No. So you haven't really lost anything doing that. So this is a zucchini seed. I have a lettuce seed, a squash, an okra seed, and a radish seed. Okay, these are the different seeds that I chose for this activity. You can talk about the sizes of the seeds, what's in a seed. If you want to, really stretch out there, you could talk about treated and non-treated seeds as far as row cropping and things like that. But for this activity, I just use very basic seeds that you would plant in your garden. Like I said, you're going to label, let the kids have lots of discussion, let the kids make predictions about which one they think might sprout first. And those kinds of things. You can make a graph. They can make their own graph. So you're going to label the fingers. You have cotton balls for this activity. You're going to need some water and your seeds. And so what you're going to do is, once you have your glove labeled, so for the zucchini, you're going to take your cotton ball and dip it in water. You have to remember that step, or your seed will not sprout. And you're going to wrap the cotton ball around the seed. Put the seed in the cotton ball, wrap the cotton ball around the seed, and put it down into the appropriate labeled finger slot. Does that make sense? So for zucchini, that's where you'll put the zucchini. And then you'll plant all of them in the glove where you have them labeled. You will want to then blow air into the glove, tie it off, and hang it in a window. And over, 4 to 5 days, 4 to 7 days, there should be some type of germination. And then once you do that, you can actually, if you want to continue growth, you can take a red Solo cup, or a clear cup would probably work even better, and cut the finger slots out once you have a little sproutling. And they'll grow just about anywhere. I know we finished a workshop this summer, and I had little sprouts all over the back of my car that had accidentally gotten left in the car. they'll just sprout and I didn't have them in a window, so they're pretty good. It's a pretty good activity. They will germinate. So you can cut them off, put them in a cup, and watch them continue to grow. Watch the seedlings grow. So
of that too. Your local co-op can actually help you out with seeds. If you just go and ask them, say, do you have any seeds that you would like to donate to my classroom? The seeds of this year can only be sold for this year. So any seeds that they have left over, I know in our local co-op, they just store them. So I just go up to the local co-op manager and say, hey, do you have any seeds? And a lot of times they will just donate. And we're not talking about, sometimes they're the little ones, but a lot of times they're like the 5 or 10 pound bag, and they will last forever. You can continue to plant those. The seed vitality on those will not be as great. It goes down some. But we have seeds that, say for 2017, that are still available that you can still plant, and they will still grow pretty well. It's also a great lesson to say if they are 94% viable this year and they go down 6% next year, if I plant 100 of them, then you would expect that 88 of them would come up. So that's a good lesson too that you could also add in there and talk about percentages as well. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to move on to the next one. There is a little video that I've attached to it. It's just a little snippet of it. So the next thing we're going to talk about is catapults. And I will say that catapults are one of my favorite activities for right now. And it's something I think my kids enjoy as well. I've done this, I kind of do a rotation. So this is the year that I'm set to do catapults in my classroom again. I usually do it between Halloween and Thanksgiving because I always tie in agritourism and how with agritourism, they often have things like catapults. So we'll kind of go to the next slide there. So catapults have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. If you think about if you had a castle that you wanted to get into, the only way to get into that castle, say in the Middle Ages, was to throw a large rock, put a hole in the wall, and you would get in. And so catapults have been used mainly traditionally for weaponry. Well, today they can be used as agritourism attractions in pumpkin chunkin'. And so I always enjoy this. I actually use mini marshmallows as the ammunition and have kids work together and knock down, say, the little Dixie cups that you would have, say, in my grandmother's bathroom when I was a kid, and stack those up and have them work together. I had a student who was autistic, and he was the best about making judgments about where they all needed to put their catapults. And that was really interesting for him because he was verbal, but he wasn't necessarily interested in communicating with people in his group. And so he oftentimes would say, hey guys, we got to move it this way, or we got to move it this way. And every time he was right. So it was really interesting. Again, it goes back to, it's not always the students that you expect to kind of roll with it, but they enjoy it nonetheless. So here's a little video.
Are you like me? Do you like watching fruit explode and also enjoy physics? Well, if so, there's probably only one place in the world where those two great tastes come together. Pumpkin Chunkin', America's annual contest to see whose homemade machine can hurl a pumpkin the farthest. Every November, thousands of amateur engineers, equal parts Da Vinci and Gallagher, converge on a farm in Delaware to put their contraptions to the test. They compete in divisions based on what kind of machine they've built, and whoever's device hurls their squash the farthest wins. The only rule, no explosives. Yeah, I know, a little bit disappointing there. But never underestimate physics. When its awesome powers are unleashed, it can make even a seemingly simple machine cause a lot of squash damage. And look good doing it. So machines at the Pumpkin Chunkin' Festival rely on the release of stored energy to get the pumpkin airborne. This energy comes from some external force that's exerted on a part of the machine. machine where it's been pent up as potential energy. For example, there are the air cannons which release all at once the potential energy of gas that's slowly been pressurized inside a container. And then there's what the contest calls centrifugal machines, where a motor spins the pumpkin around the tether, which is pretty cool, even though centrifugal force is not a thing. But from where I stand, the most delightful pumpkin chunkin' physics are found in the class of machines that you probably know as catapults. Yes, they're not just for smashing castles or upholting cats. There are actually many different kinds of catapults, including the mangonels, trebuchets, and torsion machines, each using a slightly different sort of force to create the potential energy. When you're thinking of a catapult, what you're probably seeing in your head is a mangonel. Its main feature is a long beam with a bucket on one end and the other fastened to an axle. The bucket into the beam is usually attached to a sling by the machine's main frame. Then it's pulled down to apply the force of tension. This tension is what stores up the machine's potential energy until it's released. For pumpkin chunkers, though, catapults can use springs, cords, rubber, or dead weights to apply tension, but they've added an extra touch of genius to the traditional mangonel. Instead of just a bucket on the end, what it has is a sling. What's the genius in that? Well, it gives the machine a second fulcrum, or pivot point. The first fulcrum being where the beam meets the axle. But when that's released, it throws up the sling, which amplifies the power of the first fulcrum. This is all very similar to how trebuchets work, but they're a little more sophisticated, as far as catapults go. Rather than holding all the potential energy at the tip of the beam, where the pumpkin is, trebuchets rely on a counterweight at the other end. Again, the beam is pulled down to set the device, but instead of tension being the force at work, here it's simply gravity. The heavier your counterweight is and the higher you lift it, the more force you get out when it falls. As a result, trebuchets are much more efficient, they tend to shoot a lot farther, and are more accurate, giving you more chunk for your buck. Finally, you have what the hardcore chunkers call torsion machines. Most of these kinds of catapults are hybrids of the first two. They have a sling at the pumpkin end, just like a trebuchet, but instead of gravity, they use the force of tension, like a mangonel. Unlike with a mangonel, though, the tension is applied to this machine by twisting a length of rope around the bottom of the beam. It's the same idea as twisting a rubber band on a propeller toy airplane. The twisting, or torsion, is just tension applied in a rotating direction instead of straight up and down. We all know what happens in there. But please don't try this at home unless you have a scale model or something. Just watch from the safety of your sofa. Don't miss Pumpkin Chunkin' this Thanksgiving, November 22nd at 8 p.m. only on Science Channel. And for more pumpkin carnage, check out sciencechannel.com/chunk for video.
Sorry about that. Not sure why that's not playing. It goes on to say that in the New England states, they actually have a pumpkin chunking contest. There's a video that I showed the kids. This is the one. So it talks about the physics of catapults and how they have to make adjustments. It uses force. So if you think about, I think it's a 5th grade skill where you talk about force and motion, gravity. And so pumpkin chunking is a great way to tie that in as well. So agritourism is where, say, if you talk about wineries, I don't know that I talk about that at school, but that is an agritourism nonetheless. You have, say, apple orchards and pumpkin patches and corn mazes. Those are all agritourism locations. And what happens is that a lot of times farmers that want to continue and want to change it up some way and make it more relevant, then they can add an agritourism attraction to their farm. So the materials that you would need would be, give it a moment. You're going to need a spoon, 4 rubber bands, 5 small popsicle sticks, and 2 large popsicle sticks. And so, let me stop this real quick. And I would go ahead and have these pre-packaged. It just makes it easier and gives them more time to put it together. So I have all my materials, and I'm going to start with the small popsicles. So I'm going to stack those all into one single pile. Take one of the rubber bands, and I'm going to attach on one side. Now, I will say that this is going to be the hardest part, and I think it would surprise you too to know which students don't know how to wrap a rubber band. Find the student that knows how. Once they complete theirs, go have them be your helper. So then you're going to take the other rubber band and you're going to attach the other side as well. So once you did that, you're going to take your 2 large popsicle sticks, one of the rubber bands. You can see where I'm going. If they don't know how to do a rubber band, that's going to be kind of difficult. So I've attached one end, and then I'm going to take my original stack and slide it in right above where the rubber band is. Now this is going to be the place that's going to give most of its potential energy. So you can talk about the types of energies as well. I'm going to take my last rubber band and wrap it, but I want to push it to where it's holding that original stack in place. I'll show you there. Then I'm going to take my spoon, and it slides in on the top part of the large popsicle stick there. And this is where you're going to put your ammunition. So when they're pressing, some side notes, you need to make certain that they pressed on the popsicle stick, not the spoon, because the spoon can break. It's not strong enough to really hold the force there. So then you'll lay this flat and you'll press down, and when you release it, it will actually shoot the ammunition. Side note, I did use mini marshmallows in my classroom a couple of years ago. There may or may not be mini marshmallows in my lights still in my classroom because they do fly pretty well. It's kind of chaotic, but they do such a good job with working together. And if you give them any moment to shoot something across the classroom, they're gonna love it. If you don't want to use a mini marshmallow because it can get icky and gross, and gosh, if you're actually going to be in the school building this year, then you might want to consider another option. But craft palms, that just little circles that are kind of craft palm, they can shoot as well. Now, a lot of times you have to kind of give them groundwork. It is not to be held like this. Side note, a slingshot is actually a form of a catapult because it uses force. You pull it back and it uses that potential energy to be moved forward. So this is one of my favorites, and you just tie it in with agritourism. And a lot of the kids have traveled to a pumpkin patch. Usually in kindergarten in our county, they have gone to a pumpkin patch with school. So that's a way for them to make a connection with that agriculture is not necessarily just the things that we eat, the clothes that we wear. It's also for entertainment purposes as well.
Very good. I definitely want to try that. I was writing down the directions, so definitely. I'm glad JoAnn and Valerie both talked to you about seeds a little bit, and so it's funny that I just brought, it's my traveling show. I always just bring, I have seeds, and because there's so many things you can do with seeds. You know, in the lower grades, you can have the kids categorize them and make patterns, and so Walgreens is another good place. Some of the local drugstores that sell seeds seasonally, Family Dollar, Dollar General, just make friends with the manager and say, hey, what do you do with those when you get finished? Because there's shelf life, they do have to do something with them, and they will donate them to your school. These, however, have a sell date of 2011. So once again, I have a huge box of these in my garage, and I guess it's probably dwindling by now. But I had a parent a few years ago when I was a teacher that worked for a seed company. And so Mr. Hosey asked if I would be interested in getting a donation of seeds. And, you know, as a good teacher, you say, of course, I would love that. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into because I still have seeds, and I haven't been in the classroom teaching in over 15 years. And Mr. Hosey's kids are probably out of college now. But be careful what you ask for, because when the truckload of boxes came in, they were just scattered because evidently they pick them up from stores when the shelf life is over with, and they just threw them in random boxes. So it was a great opportunity for my after school kids to categorize them. So we just took gallon size baggies, and we this is actually an herb garden bag. So I had parsley and some of the rosemary and things. So this is a bag of seeds that you can make herb gardens with. But we also had a visitor to my classroom. So these seeds came from out of Pennsylvania, and it was cold weather, and my classroom was warm. And I noticed as the kids were putting together the radish seeds, they were like, the ends of the seed packets were open. And the kids kept saying, "It looks like something has eaten a hole in the radishes." I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what that means. So I had a little mouse about this big that invaded my classroom, and I know that it came from the seed box. So be careful about your donations and just make sure the little critters aren't coming along with you. So with that said, you can get a lot of information off of a seed packet. One thing that I like to do is just have the kids read for information. And give them random seed packets and just say, does your plant require full sun, partial sun, no sun? And then have them actually get together in the room, if you can do that this year. And so it's interesting that they can categorize their plants by the type of lighting, the type of planting, their timing, the care, and the harvest. So, and it's really funny because you could actually say, okay, I'm going to plant a garden in the spring. All of the seed packets that would make great spring plants, come to the east part of the classroom, and talking about direction. And it's interesting to see the kids, collaborating, going, okay, do I plant cucumbers in the fall, or, do I plant pumpkins in January? So it's a great little problem solving. You can do a lot with a seed packet, and most of the time they're free. So if you get in a bind and you need some seeds, contact me and I will get you some from my garage. So that will make my husband very happy to get rid of another couple of boxes. So today we're going to work on feed sacks. And I have to say that slow because you can say it fast and it makes something totally inappropriate. But you can Google this. You can find this at many different ag consultant places. And I'm going to share the screen just for a second so I can show you the actual, oh Lord have mercy, the actual activity. And then I will actually get back and show you, but it's called, it makes a bag of goodies to represent what animals eat. So I'm going to talk to you about a pig feed sack. I'm sure you all have seen many of those, but you can also use a horse feed sack, which I have seen several of those. And then you can do a seasonal feed sack called a reindeer feed sack, which I'll explain in a minute. So that is the actual write-up of the activity, and then it sort of gives you a graphic of what the representation of, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be red, or blue, white, or silver candy. And I'll show you in just a second. I'm going to stop sharing and show you what I brought, because a good farmer always just makes do with what they have. So today I have gummy bears, and they're going to represent water. And I have marshmallows. There's a few left. So that's going to be the fat content that a pig needs. I have some corn checks that I took out of my pantry. And those are going to represent the carbohydrates that a pig needs. So you sort of get the gist. You can just use what you have on hand. I don't know why I have grape nuts, but grape nuts will represent the protein. And then I pulled out some, I had one of my husband's 100 energy calorie packs, and I have dried cherries, which would represent the minerals instead of the raisins. So I just took sort of what I what I had in my pantry, and then went from there. So the other material that you need is a snack size baggie and a piece of yarn or string. So I use yarn for this one activity because you're going to make a necklace. So I cut the holes. So true thing. I just took an ink pen and just went tink. But you can take a hole punch and make it really a lot nicer hole. But I just took an ink pen and made 2 holes above the ceiling line. And I took my piece of yarn, and this is what you're going to do after it's over with. And then if I want to get fancy, when I make the reindeer feed sacks at Christmas, I have a cute label that says the reindeer feed sack, and it's Christmassy and it's cutesy. So you're going to have the kids open up their feed sack, and you're going to one thing that I would do is decide how many of these corn checks would represent what you're wanting it to, the carbohydrates, because if you don't, you're going to have Johnny in your classroom pour the whole cereal box into the feed sack, and that's not cool. So I tend to use the solo cups, and I have the kids in groups go over and let's just say there are 10 of them. I'm going to estimate there are 10 of these that will take the diet of a hog for the day. And it's also good about ratios. You can talk to the kids about percentages of the diet and their ratios. So this is a good little math question problem too. You can use the mini marshmallows from your Catapult experiment, or you can use these big fat ones for the fat content. And I just simply put them in there, and then so on and so forth with the other ingredients. But it's a great little thing for the kids to determine. And you'll see that the certain things lend itself to a larger percent of the hog's diet. And then last but not least, the grape nuts cereal. So it's also given the kids an opportunity to eat something that's halfway, a snack that's halfway decent to eat, as far as in an alternative to eating chocolate all day long, which I love to do. So what we do with this is we are very fortunate at my school that we have the outside garden. And so we'll take this, and the kids will go outside to the garden or the playground, or take a little walk, a nature walk, and that you'll see them throughout the day. Because you'll think 5th graders think this is stupid. No, they love this, and they'll be taken, and they'll simply be eating this trail mix or feed sack all day long. I will tell you, at Christmas, I do jazz it up a little bit, and we put some reindeer sparkle and make it really cute especially for the little ones. You can make it as nutritious as you want, or as fat consuming as you want. M&Ms make another great one to add to the feed sack, but this is a favorite of the kids and of my staff. I do this with my staff at least once a year, and it's also a great little thing to use on field trips, especially when we go up to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This is a great little a snack for the kids to have. But I use this from pre-K up to college age, some of the college age kids I teach. It's just a great little alternative, and it gives you an opportunity to talk about what goes into the diet of different animals. I will say, I had around Thanksgiving, I had a teacher use a turkey feed sack. Have you all ever seen a turkey feed sack? I think that would be like a little small one, but she was trying to coordinate with her holidays. But once again, this is just another way to incorporate and talk about ag in the classroom, and make it meaningful for the kids, and eat, because that's what we like to do. Ag is definitely correlated to eating and drinking, so we definitely want to continue to do that. Would y'all like to take another 10-minute break? I know I need to. So let's take another 10-minute break, and let's be back. It's 12:08 my time and probably 11:08 your time. So let's be back at 11:18 or 12:18 Eastern, if that's okay, and we'll have some more activities. Thank you.